Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today for our live broadcast here, Life on Board Amtrak with Amtrak Vacations. Uh, I see that a lot of folks are still logging in right at this time. Of course, we are just right now at 3 o'clock, so I'm just going to give it a moment and allow everybody to get the system up and running here. I just want to say thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to daydream with us about travel across the USA with Amtrak Vacations. All right, folks, so let's go ahead and get started here. My name is Colleen McCarthy. Thank you so much for joining me. I have had the great privilege of working with Amtrak Vacations for almost the last 8 years now, and I've been very lucky and able to go out on some of these amazing train journeys that we're going to look at today. So I can tell you firsthand that it's a really fantastic experience. Um, Before we get started, I do want to point out that there's a couple great features with our webinar today. The first is the handout section. So we've got a couple really neat handouts for you. You can download them at any time. You should see them on your little screen here, how to customize or and information about our different packages that we offer, as well as a great little cheat sheet on board about the onboard accommodations here with Amtrak. So some great information for you on the coach seating, and then if you upgrade to the sleeper cabin options as well. So at any time, feel free to download those for your reference. And as I go throughout the presentation today, please, please, please feel free to type away the questions, any questions you might have at all about our trips, about Amtrak, anything you're interested in, please let me know. I will take as many questions as possible at the end of our presentation here. And if I don't have a chance to get back to you live on the broadcast today, we'll certainly have somebody follow up to get you the answer to your question. So please feel free to type away throughout the presentation any questions you might have. It's my favorite part at the end to actually get to interact with you guys and go through some of your questions, answer the interesting things that have been puzzling you about Amtrak. Just to touch on here as we start, Amtrak Vacations, we're operated by Yankee Leisure Group. We've got a couple other great brands that may interest you. Yankee Holidays is travel throughout the USA and Canada, and our Rail Bookers brand is the same kind of trip that you come to expect with Amtrak Vacations, but expanded, so across Europe, Asia, Australia, South Africa, pretty much anywhere you want to go. If the train goes there, so do we. But today, of course, we're going to be talking about Amtrak Vacations and some really fantastic travel across the USA and on up into Canada as well. So before we really get started, I just want to touch on sort of the obvious elephant in the room. These are not maybe usual times that we're talking about, right? So I happen to be coming to you today live from my very tiny laundry room. There's a pile of sweaters next to me that need folding whenever we finish up here today. So I do know that these are unusual times and that you folks may have some concerns about traveling or about booking travel with everything that's going on in the world. So I just want to reassure you a little bit. With Amtrak Vacations, we do offer you maximum flexibility. So for any new reservations or any existing reservations, if you've already got something planned with us, you can go ahead and change your travel dates, or if you needed to, cancel your rail vacation right up until 5 days prior to your rail departure without incurring any change or cancellation fees. So we've been working really hard. If you have a trip already booked with us, you've probably spoken to us for the spring. We've been really working hard to be able to move you guys out to the fall or even into next year. One of the great things about booking with Amtrak Vacations is that we do book trips for you folks all the way up to 2 years in advance. So we could even book as far out as spring of 2022 right now. So it just gives you that little bit of peace of mind if you are thinking about booking your trip for later this fall, end of summer, or even into next year, that you've got some really great flexibility. You could change your dates of your trip right up until 5 days before you leave. And on to the main feature here. With Amtrak Vacations, I always like to start these presentations by pulling up our Amtrak Vacations system map. And I think it's just really striking for folks who maybe don't realize just how far Amtrak grows across the USA and on up into Canada. As you can see on the map here, we can travel from the East Coast, Boston, New York, Washington, all the way over to the West Coast, to California, to Oregon, to Washington State. You can also travel up into Canada, the Canadian Rockies on the western part of the country, or Niagara Falls, Montreal on the eastern part of the US. Just a couple fun facts for you. So Amtrak does go to 46 out of the 48 continuous United States, and they have over 500 railway stations across the USA. So if you don't happen to live in a major metropolis, I'm sure there is probably an Amtrak station relatively nearby you. You can start from any one of the trips that we're going to look at today from your hometown Amtrak station. You may need to connect into a bigger station, but we can make those arrangements for you with no problems. And Amtrak did have over 31 million people travel throughout the USA and up into Canada last year. So very popular to take the train. And as you can see here, you can go pretty much anywhere you can dream of on board Amtrak with us. And one of the things that I really like about traveling on board Amtrak is that the journey really becomes part of your whole experience. It's not just a way to get from point A to point B. It's really the whole journey on board the train is its own unique experience. We really call it oftentimes a bucket list trip. I know it's something that you may have been dreaming about here, kind of the romance of the rails, right? You want to get your little sleeper cabin, you want to eat a meal cooked to order in the dining car. It's really, some of the destinations as well that we offer, iconic cities and national parks throughout the US. Definitely a bucket list experience for you. As well, we have some really tremendous freedom and flexibility. We'll touch on customization as we go through today's presentation, but I just want you to keep in mind that any of the trips that you see here, we can customize them to fit your unique interests and needs. So if we do a trip here that starts out in Chicago and you want to start from your hometown instead, that's easily done for us. We also have multiple departures per day, and like I said, hundreds of stations across the US. Travel on board Amtrak is also hassle-free. So it is not the same experience you might have had if you've traveled by airplane recently. You do not need to show up 3 hours early. You can bring a very generous allowance of luggage. You can bring a full-size bottle of shampoo if you want. So it's definitely hassle-free. You're not going to be crammed into a middle seat. You can get up and stroll across the train. There's room to roam as well. With Amtrak Vacations too, we are the official tour operator of Amtrak. So what that means is, we are their official partner. It gives us some great unique advantages as far as giving you folks some tremendous deals, as well as being able to book. So 24 months or 2 years in advance. So like I said, we can book out to the spring of 2022 right now, which you wouldn't be able to do, necessarily on your own. Amtrak also provides city-to-city service. So if you've ever flown into Chicago or New York City, you'll have experienced what I have, which is an almost hour-long taxi ride to actually get to where you want to go. But that is not true for Amtrak. So with Amtrak, when you come into New York City, you're going to arrive in Penn Station, which is, right next to Madison Square Garden. It's less than a mile from Times Square. It's right in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, just where you want to be as a tourist who wants to, explore that great city. Same thing in Chicago. You're right downtown. You're right near the Magnificent Mile and the museum campus. So you're, really centrally located. Amtrak can also bring you almost to the front door of some of our national parks. So Glacier National Park, which we'll talk about later, the Amtrak station is 206 steps from the front door of the lodge where you're going to stay. So it is really pretty spectacular city to city service with Amtrak. And as well, there is something for everyone. Whether you want to eat in the dining car, you want to sleep on the bunk beds of your sleeper cabin, whatever it is you're looking for, the Amtrak experience has that for you. And as I mentioned before, all of your rail vacations that we're going to look at today and everything on our website is customizable. So if you want to start from your hometown, if you're in the Northeast like me, maybe you don't want to go all the way into Boston, you might live closer to the Route 128 stop in Westwood, right? So you can hop on the train there. Same thing if you live near, any of the major stations, you can hop on the train in your local Amtrak station and get started on your journey by train right away. You can also change the itineraries of the trips that we're looking at too. So for example, our Rails to the Grand Canyon package is one of our best-selling trips out to the Grand Canyon. It normally includes 2 nights up at the South Rim of the Grand Canyon, but you folks can add extra nights. You can also change the accommodations. You can stay at the iconic El Tovar Hotel if you want. And then after the trip, the train itself continues on to Los Angeles, so we can always book you that train to Los Angeles, and you can add on a Los Angeles getaway and see the Hollywood sign and where the stars live. So it's definitely customizable for you. You can combine multiple trips together. You can change the number of nights at each location. We can start from your hometown. We can customize your hotel and your activities as well. If you're afraid of heights, you don't have to go to the top of the Space Needle. We can get you a harbor cruise instead. So there's a lot of different options for you. So just keep that in mind as we go throughout today's presentation. I'm going to highlight some of our most popular Amtrak Vacations trips in order to talk about what life is like on board the train. Just to give you some contextual information here, as we look at the trips, we'll talk about what it's really like to journey on board the train on some of these really popular and famous destinations. The first trip we're going to talk about is the Grand National Parks Discovery trip on the California Zephyr. Now, I know that if you work with Amtrak, you're not supposed to necessarily have a favorite route. You're supposed to love them all, and I do. But the California Zephyr definitely holds a special place in my heart as one of my favorite Amtrak journeys. The California Zephyr train starts out in Chicago and goes all the way to the West Coast, ending up in San Francisco in California. And it really hits some absolutely stunning and fantastic scenery along the way. This particular trip here starts out in Denver for 2 nights. And while you're in Denver, you're going to see Rocky Mountain National Park. You then train over to Grand Junction, and that's a great hopping off point to do some amazing sightseeing tours of the national parks throughout Utah. So you're going to see basically the main 5 parks in Utah there, Arches and Canyonlands, Bryce and Zion, as well as Capitol Reef National Park. Spend a couple nights there in Utah while you're exploring those national parks, and then come on back to Grand Junction. You'll hop on the train again in Grand Junction to take it out to Salt Lake City, Utah, and then travel up to Yellowstone National Park, right there in Montana and Wyoming. Absolutely amazing destination, Yellowstone National Park. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. You spend a couple nights there before you do an overnight ride from Salt Lake City to San Francisco. So this is a great opportunity for you folks to look at upgrading to one of our sleeper cabins so that you get that full overnight experience. And then you'll do 2 nights in San Francisco and visit Yosemite National Park. So this is really an absolutely amazing trip because of how many national parks you get to see and because of the spectacular scenery that you see by train. So like I said, the California Zephyr is one of my favorite Amtrak routes throughout the USA here. You see the Rocky Mountains of Colorado when you go from Denver to Grand Junction. You see some beautiful red rocks and kind of desert scenery as you follow the Colorado River from Grand Junction on to Salt Lake City. After your excursion up to Yellowstone National Park, you travel overnight into California and you hit the Sierra Nevada mountains as you rise into California. So some really spectacular kind of pine trees and mountain scenery there as you come into California. So it's really different and changing landscapes that you get to see on the California Zephyr train. It's really pretty spectacular. When you folks are in Denver, you'll see Rocky Mountain National Park. So that's a full day sightseeing tour. Picks up from right downtown near your hotel. Brings you out to the Rocky Mountain National Park where you get to spend the whole day. You'll get to go to several different parts of the park and see several different, overlooks. Hopefully you'll get to see some wildlife. Back's lunch is included there for you on that tour. Then they drop you right back off downtown in Denver. There's also an optional hike as part of that tour, or you could just sit back, relax, and enjoy the scenery of the overlook, just depending on what you want to do. And then you travel on into Utah, and you're going to see Arches and Canyonlands National Park. You're going to see Zion National Park, and you're going to see Capitol Reef and Bryce Canyon. You really can't say enough about these Utah parks. They're so gorgeous and stunning with their amazing red rock formations, the slot canyons, the rivers, just some of those tremendous overlooks. And you'll get to see all of that amazing scenery on this trip here. Now, after the Utah parks, you'll come back to Grand Junction and you'll take the train across to Salt Lake City, which is your jumping off point to visit Yellowstone National Park. And Yellowstone National Park is an unbelievable place. They've got amazing geothermal features. So of course everyone knows the Old Faithful geyser, but there's many, many different geysers and different geothermal features throughout Yellowstone National Park. So you've got the boiling mud pots, you've got the Great Caldera and some of these stunning karst landscapes. And then there's a tremendous abundance of wildlife in Yellowstone as well. And this trip finishes up with an overnight ride on the California Zephyr from Salt Lake City out to San Francisco, where you get to visit Yosemite National Park in Yosemite Valley and just see some amazing soaring mountains, tremendous waterfalls, and hopefully some wildlife there as well in Yosemite. So this is definitely one of my favorite trips. The Grand National Parks in the California Zephyr starts from $3,849 per person, just depending on when you want to go. And it's really an amazing way to see a tremendous amount of national parks in a relatively short amount of time. It's only 11 nights hotel accommodations and then one overnight on the train. So it's just a 12-night trip here. And you get to knock out something like, 6 or 7 parks. Included on that as well. So it's a really tremendous experience, and it's a great way to take the California Zephyr, which is one of Amtrak's most iconic train routes. This next trip here I included specifically for you rail buffs. This is called the Northern Rail Experience, and this one is a great time to talk about again, some of the real great features of living on board Amtrak, because this trip really features that onboard experience. It starts out in Chicago, which is one of Amtrak's major hubs. You'll see throughout the presentation, a lot of our trips do start in Chicago, and it just happens to be because that is one of the major hubs for Amtrak where the trains start and end their journeys. Again, if you live somewhere else, we can certainly get you by train out to Chicago to start any of these trips. So this trip starts in Chicago, and then you take the Empire Builder train all the way across northern United States, through Nebraska, through Montana. It actually goes right through Glacier National Park on its way to Seattle. So that's 2 overnights on the train. You'll spend 1 overnight in Seattle, and then you take Amtrak's Coast Starlight overnight from Seattle to San Francisco. That's a really amazing experience as well. The Coast Starlight, quite famous train. It actually runs from Seattle all the way down to LA if you were to take the whole trip. In this one, though, we have you get off in San Francisco for 2 nights so that you can take my favorite California Zephyr train back across the middle of the country through the Rocky Mountains on back to Chicago. So that's 2 overnights on your way back to Chicago as well. This trip features Seattle, so it's a really great place to visit. What we have included for you here is the Hop On Hop Off tour of Seattle. You'll see the Hop On Hop Off tours featured in a lot of our different vacations. If you've never been in a Hop On Hop Off tour, it's a really fantastic way to see the city that you're in. So it's really simple to use. You just hop on at the stop closest to you. You ride it out to an attraction that interests you. Let's say it's the Space Needle. You can get off at the Space Needle and explore to your heart's content, stay as long as you like, and then you just get on the next trolley to come by. They run about every 20 minutes or maybe 30 minutes, a little bit in the off season. So it's a really convenient form of transportation. And while you're on board the trolley or the bus, it's a fully narrated tour. So your guide is telling you all about the different sites that you're seeing as you pass by, a lot of the main, attractions of the city and some great information there. So we include those in a lot of our different vacations just because we find that they're a really fantastic way to get to know a new city and to get around without having to try and figure out the local public transportation. Now, once you leave Seattle, it is an overnight ride on the Coast Starlight train from Seattle down to San Francisco. That Coast Starlight train that you can see there in the photo, it's absolutely stunning. In this part of the ride, it goes through the Cascade Mountains and some of the almost rainforesty type scenery. They're in the Pacific Northwest, so it's a beautiful ride. As you can see in the photo there, this is a double-decker train, so there's 2 levels on board this train. So that's quite typical for Amtrak's major long-distance routes. So most of the train routes that we're going to talk about today, the Empire Builder, Coast Starlight, California Zephyr, Southwest Chief a little later on, all of these major cross-country routes are double-decker trains. Now, the double-decker trains are fantastic because you can have accommodations on board the bottom level or the top level. So depending on your mobility, if you have a little bit of trouble with stairs, we could get you room on the bottom level. Or if that's not a problem and you want the better view, right, you can have a room on the top level. As well, you can visit the different types of train cars. So of course, there's the sleeper car if you do have a cabin. There's the coach car if you folks are gonna, stay in the coach, especially for some of these shorter journeys that are just a daytime ride, like Denver to Grand Junction, for example. There's also the dining car on board the train and the observation car on board the train, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. Now, once you take the Coast Starlight train, it brings you to San Francisco, which is one of my favorite cities in the US. Just a really fun, vibrant, excellent place to visit. Amazing food. If you are a foodie, there's some great seafood. They've got a great little Italy as well. This trip does include a hop on, hop off sightseeing tour of San Francisco. So again, you can get on near Fisherman's Wharf if that's where you're staying. You can ride it around to the amazing park, to the Golden Gate Bridge. And it's a great way to see and understand more about the city. But we also want you to, since you're spending 2 nights, be able to get out and stretch your legs in nature a little bit. So we have you take the tour out to Muir Woods, which is the amazing, gigantic redwood trees just outside of San Francisco. And it also includes a sightseeing cruise in the bay. So this is one of my favorite ways to see San Francisco. If you're going to go all the way out to the Pacific Ocean, you really need to get out on the water. You just have some tremendous views of the Golden Gate Bridge and the city itself from the water from that cruise. So I love that we include that there for you. So again, this Northern Rail Experience trip, it's really designed for you rail buffs who really want to get that full train experience. It actually has 5 nights on board Amtrak altogether. So this is an excellent opportunity for you folks to look into upgrading to one of the sleeper cabins on board Amtrak. There's some really great features when you upgrade to one of the sleeper cabins. So not only, of course, do you get a bed for the night, right? You have your own private area. You can shut the door, take a nap. You've got your own private space. As well, when you do upgrade to the sleeper accommodations on board Amtrak, all of your meals on board the train are included for you. So you've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For example, when you leave San Francisco and head back to Chicago, you've got a couple days on board the train. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are included for you. You can choose off of a pretty varied menu, so you don't have to have the same breakfast 2 days in a row, right? Don't have to have the same dinner 2 days in a row. You can have the steak the first night made to order. So if you like it medium rare, they'll cook it to your specifications. And then the second night you could have the pasta dish. They've got pasta, they've got salads, they've got, all kinds of variety there in the dining car. And all of the trips that we are looking at today, primarily they do feature the long distance trains, which do have the full dining car experience. So that is made to order food fresh for you there on the train. So you can order up an omelet just the way you like it. One other perk of upgrading to the sleeper cabins on board Amtrak is that you have access to the special metropolitan lounges in some of the major stations. So in Chicago, in Los Angeles, there's what's called the Sightseer Lounge or the Metropolitan Lounge just changes a bit based on the station. But if you have a roomette or bedroom cabin on board Amtrak, you are considered to be one of the first class passengers, and you can relax in this lounge prior to your trip. They've got little snacks available for you. You'll get priority boarding as well, so they'll escort you down to the train when it's time to go. They'll keep an eye on your bigger luggage there, things like that. So it's a nice, again, little perk of upgrading to those roomette or bedroom cars. We will see some photos of those sleepers in just a little bit here too. Um, the next trip I really want to talk to you folks about is our Grand National Parks with Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Grand Canyon. Of course, we looked at the the parks on the California Zephyr just a minute ago, which did include Yellowstone and Yosemite, but this one also features the Southwest Chief Train and the Grand Canyon, which is just absolutely unbelievable sight. So if you've not been to the Grand Canyon, I highly recommend, if at all possible, you take a trip out there. It's just breathtaking. It's absolutely stunning. You know, the first time I saw it, I genuinely thought I was on a movie set. It didn't look real because it just continues on and on as far as the eye can see. It's just incredible. And it also features another really cool little train ride. So the Grand Canyon Railway train that you can see in the photo here is a really neat ride. So Amtrak will bring you into Williams, Arizona, which is considered the gateway to the Grand Canyon. It's actually a really neat little town right on historic Route 66. They've got some great restaurants and great, Route 66 shops and memorabilia there in Williams. But to get to the actual Grand Canyon itself, it's about a 2-hour ride on this Grand Canyon Railway train, which you see in this photo there. Oftentimes, it's pulled by a steam engine, which is really pretty neat. The steam engine's in the yard for you to take photos with as well. And this is about a 2-hour ride up to the south rim of the Grand Canyon itself. It's a lot of fun. They have cowboys on board the train who sing to you. At one point, there's a train robbery with some outlaws who decide to try and rob the train. It's a lot of fun for adults and also for kids. This is a really great trip if you do have kids that you're thinking about taking on Amtrak. This Grand Canyon trip is a lot of fun for them. Now, when we get you up to the south rim of the Grand Canyon, we actually have you stay right there in one of the historic national park lodges. So these iconic national park lodges right inside the Grand Canyon. That's where you stay with our Amtrak Vacations trips. And we do include a tour for you, which is going to take you out to some really breathtaking overlooks to see some views like this where you can have some, tremendous photo opportunities. And the guides on these tours are great too. They'll tell you all about how the canyon was formed, the significance to the native people. So it's just really informative, really gorgeous tour of the Grand Canyon for you. And again, these are customizable. So even though this trip normally includes just one night in the Grand Canyon, if you wanted to extend that and add more, you certainly could do so. The other national parks featured on this trip are Yellowstone and Yosemite. So Yellowstone, again, amazing geothermal features. You've got the geysers, you've got the caldera, you've got some incredible wildlife viewing there in Yellowstone. And then we have you come along to Yosemite National Park, which again, Yosemite Valley is a really special place. It's one of the first protected lands that we have in the US. It was a state park before it was a national park. But it's one of the first, protected landscapes that we have here in the US, and it's just so clear why. It's amazing to see. So this trip hits 3 of the major national parks in the US. If you ask somebody to name a national park, I can almost guarantee one of these 3 is going to be the first out of their mouth. So it's a great bucket list opportunity for you to check off some of the major national parks from your list, and also some of Amtrak's, major train routes. So of course it features the California Zephyr leaving Chicago, hitting Yellowstone and Yosemite, the Coast Starlight from San Francisco down to Los Angeles. Now I can't say enough about that. That half of the ride is absolutely spectacular on the Coast Starlight. You see it hugs the California coast. So when you first leave San Francisco, you go through some beautiful vineyards and things like that. And then about the second half of the ride, it really starts to hug that California coastline, and you see some amazing beaches and coastal scenery that you couldn't even see by car. It's really, really quite tremendous. that part of the Coast Starlight train. And then, of course, we have you do a night in Los Angeles before you take Amtrak Southwest Chief out to the Grand Canyon and then continuing on back to Chicago. So that's a beautiful ride as well. At one point, on the Southwest Chief, you go through canyon walls, which are only just wider than the train itself, so you can see, you're right inside the slot canyon. It's really incredible. So beautiful kind of deserty scenery on that ride there on the Southwest Chief. Now, obviously, these ones that I was just looking at are a little bit longer itineraries, right? They're 12, 13 night itineraries. If you don't have that much time, but you still want to see a couple absolutely amazing national parks on my favorite train, the California Zephyr, the Grand Tetons and Yellowstone Rail Journey might be for you. So the Grand Tetons and Yellowstone Rail Journey starts in Chicago, and it's one overnight out to Salt Lake City. You spend 2 nights in Salt Lake City. First, you spend the first night, and then you go up to Jackson Hole, which is where you're going to do your tour of Grand Teton National Park, and then on up into Yellowstone. And I should mention on this trip as well, you stay inside the national park. So you're going to stay inside Yellowstone National Park, right at one of the national park lodges, which is a really great opportunity for you. Those lodges do sell out really far in advance, but we have that space secured here for you with Amtrak Vacations. So you can still book for this summer or this fall, and we can still get you space right inside the national park. And that just gives you such a great advantage because you are right there. When you wake up in the morning, you can go on a sunrise tour if you're that early of a riser, or stay late for sunset and you're not too far back from your lodge at the end of the day. It's really just spectacular scenery up there in that area. The Grand Teton National Park is incredible, and you do have a sightseeing tour of that park, which focuses primarily on the wildlife of that area, which is pretty neat. So you can see moose and elk and bison. Then when you get on into Yellowstone, again, there's amazing wildlife. Bison, there's bears. If you're really lucky, there's bald eagles, there's wolves, foxes, otters, beavers, badgers, just all kinds of different wildlife, as well as the amazing, geysers and things like that to see in Yellowstone. One of the great things about this trip too is that it does cover some of the most scenic parts of the California Zephyr train. So when you wake up in the morning, it's going to be right around, depending on what time you wake up, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. You're going to be headed right through Denver at that time and right into the Rocky Mountains. So your train is going to start climbing into the Rocky Mountains as the sun is coming up, and it's just going to be a really spectacular time. I really highly recommend that you head down to the observation car. So all of these long distance routes that we've been talking about do have observation cars. So as I mentioned, the train is a double-decker train. So the bottom level of that car is the cafe, or the snack car, as I like to call it. If you're peckish in between meal times, you can head down to the snack car and grab a muffin. In the evening, you can grab a cocktail or a glass of wine in the snack car, the cafe car. And then bring it on up into the observation car. The observation car is a really special place to hang out. It's got floor to ceiling windows, little kind of half dome over the top, so you can get some really amazing photos and just soak in some of that natural beauty as you go through the US. The Rocky Mountains are obviously spectacular. Even when you come down into Utah and you're following the Colorado River and you're just looking at the red rocks kind of rising on either side of the train, it's a really amazing place to spend the afternoon. And I do have a lot of people ask me, is it tough to get a seat in the observation car? Because obviously that's where everyone wants to spend their time, right? But I've been on the California Zephyr a couple times. I've been on the Coast Starlight and the Southwest Chief. And honestly, I've really never had much of a problem finding a seat in the observation car. And the reason for that is that people are just constantly moving around, right? So if you think about it, people are not always staying on the train from Chicago all the way to San Francisco in one swoop, right? They're going to do what you're doing. They're going to get off in Denver for a couple nights, and then Grand Junction, and then Salt Lake, and so on. So people are always getting off the train at the different stops. People are also always going down to the dining car. So the way that the dining car works is they have different seatings for lunch and dinner. So you sign up, make basically a reservation with the dining car when you first get on board the train. So let's say you make a reservation for the 5 o'clock seating for dinner. What's going to happen is they're going to make an announcement over the loudspeaker, and they're going to say, everybody for the 5 o'clock seating, please head down to the dining car. So all of a sudden, 10, 15 people in that observation car are going to get up and they're going to head right down to the dining car. So it's always especially easy to find seats kind of right as that half hour changes in the afternoon and in the evening as people get up and head down to dinner and things like that. So obviously these are a little bit longer trips we've been looking at here. But if you just want to do a shorter experience, if you don't quite have that much time just yet, you can also do a weekend getaway or something like that. So for example, our Niagara Falls Ultimate Getaway up to Canada here, it includes 3 nights hotel accommodations, so you could do it in a long weekend quite easily. And we have a lot of activities packed into that weekend. We have the Adventure Pass, which has admission to 4 of the main attractions there in Niagara Falls, including, as you can see in the photo, that boat ride out to the base of the falls. So you get the poncho, you get right up to the mist and get all wet. That's included in this trip for you. As well, there's actually an option to go behind part of the falls, and that's some pretty spectacular photos as well. We also have admission to the Skylon Tower, which is a beautiful towering observation deck so you can get a bird's eye view of Niagara Falls, and dinner at a popular restaurant, which, like everything there, also overlooks the falls. So just 3 days in Niagara Falls, but it's a really action-packed kind of long weekend. If you folks are looking for something to do this fall, maybe a little bit of a shorter trip this fall, I highly recommend this trip up to Niagara Falls, because not only is Niagara Falls a really fun place to spend some time, a really beautiful scenery, but the train ride up to Niagara Falls is really stunning in the fall, because the fall foliage in New England and upper Vermont and New York is really spectacular at that time of year. So you get some really beautiful train rides to and from Niagara Falls if you are interested in that this fall. Or if you live around the middle of the country, we have this great Glenwood Springs getaway trip, round trip from Denver. So this particular trip that we're featuring is round trip from Denver, but of course you could go from Salt Lake or Grand Junction, or whatever rail station is close to home for you. There's 2 nights accommodations there in Glenwood Springs, which of course is famous for their hot springs, as well as the trip includes admission to the tram and cave tours. Now this trip features seating in Amtrak's coach accommodations, because it is just a day trip from Denver to Glenwood Springs. And I just want to spend a quick minute to touch on the coach seating, which you will see in just a minute. I've got a slide for you, but it is really comfortable, folks. I actually don't like the word coach seating, because I think that it makes you think about the cramped middle seats with no legroom whatsoever that you face on an airplane. And that's really just not the case at all with Amtrak. With Amtrak, the coach seats are very spacious. There's 2 seats, and then the aisle, and then 2 more seats. So there's no middle seat situation whatsoever. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit short, but I cannot even fully kick the seat in front of me, even if I wanted to, which of course I don't. But I can't even fully kick the seat in front of me. That's how much legroom there is. They're just really spacious and quite nice. If you're over on the East Coast, we've got fantastic trips to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Charleston, Savannah, or one of my favorites, which is why it's in our presentation today, which is the Washington, D.C. Ultimate Getaway. 3 nights hotel accommodations in Washington, D.C., with admission to the International Spy Museum, the Hop On Hop Off tour, multi-day, so 2-day tour on that one. So that way you can get all around and see all of the monuments and all of the amazing museums, that Washington has to offer. And this trip also includes one of my very favorite tours that we have in any of our destinations across the US or Canada, which is the Monuments by Moonlight tour. If you've not been lucky enough to visit Washington, D.C., you should know that in the evening, when the sky gets dark, they light up all of the monuments, so the White House and the Capitol building and the Jefferson Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial. They all get lit up in the evening with these beautiful lights. And the Monuments by Moonlight tour is specifically designed around that to take you out in the evening to see the beautiful monuments. It's just an amazing different viewpoint of some of the monuments that you're so used to seeing in photos. It's really lovely tour, and that's included for you in the Washington D.C. Ultimate Getaway. And again, this trip can start from anywhere. Middle of Connecticut or down south. The train goes to Washington from New Orleans. It goes there from Chicago. So kind of wherever you are, again, we can arrange, the Amtrak to get you to the destination. And this is actually a great opportunity to talk about our hotel accommodations that are featured in these packages. Because, like I said, if you're visiting one of the national parks, a lot of the times we have the hotel space for you actually in the national park. But if you're visiting a city like San Francisco or Washington, we have a lot of different choices for you. And it really just depends on what you're looking for in a hotel. We can find that for you. So we have 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star options. And all of our hotels, we really pride ourselves in curating a hotel selection that is extremely conveniently located. So one of my favorite hotels that we offer is in Washington, D.C. It's right across the street from the train station. So it's super convenient. When you get out of the train station, you walk across the road and there is your hotel. And the hop on, hop off tour that's included literally picks up right at the train station. So you can hop on the hop on, hop off tour and take it out to the White House, the Capitol building, the National Mall, wherever you want to go. We also have a hotel that's right down by the National Mall. So if you want to spend your time visiting the Smithsonian Museum, some of those amazing museums that we have here in our nation's capital, you can stay right down there by the action. Same thing in Chicago. We have hotels right by the museum campus, or we have hotels right up on Magnificent Mile if you want to do some shopping. So it's really depending on what you're looking for, the type of hotel, and also the location. We can, customize that for you. So finally, we're getting to the point that I know you've all been waiting for, which is looking at some of the great photos and things like that of the train. So I have been talking about what it's like on board Amtrak throughout, but people always ask me, one of the things that I always get asked about is what should I pack for my trip on board Amtrak? So the great thing about Amtrak vacations, traveling on board Amtrak, is that there's a very generous luggage allowance. So you can bring 2 free carry-on bags, and we're not just talking about tiny itty bitty carry-ons. The size for Amtrak is quite generous. You can also bring 2 checked bags, so 2 big bags, and a personal item. Doesn't say it on here, but yeah, 2 free carry-ons, 2 free checked bags, and a personal item. So up to 5 pieces of luggage. I don't really recommend that you bring maybe 5 pieces of luggage just because you have to part them around yourself. But if you wanted to, you totally can. Most stations do have checked baggage available. So all of the major stations we've talked about today, Chicago, LA, San Fran, Washington, Niagara Falls, even the national park stations in Arizona for the Grand Canyon, um, in Salt Lake for Yellowstone, in Denver for Rocky Mountain. All of those stations have checked luggage available. You'll just want to check with us before you make your reservations if you are starting at a smaller station nearby your hometown. Now, the checked baggage does work just like on an airplane, basically. So if you check a bag in Chicago, you're not going to see it again until you arrive, let's say, in Seattle. So anything important that you need during your 2 days on board the train, so pajamas, toothbrush, snacks, any medications that you need, you're going to want to pack those in a smaller carry-on bag, which you can bring into your roomette or bedroom, or if you're in coach, you can put it right overhead, in your coach seating. To check luggage, you do have to be there 45 minutes prior to departure. So I do like to recommend, if you are going to check a bag, that you get to the station about an hour before your train is scheduled to depart. And that way you have enough time to get the lay of the land. Some of the stations are quite big in Chicago and Los Angeles, places like that. So you want to give yourself enough time to actually get into the station, find the check-in desk, and check that luggage. Now, if you don't need to check luggage, if you're just going to bring a carry-on, you can probably show up about 45 minutes to a half an hour before the train ride. Again, just to get the lay of the land, make sure you know where the track is that you need to get on, but you don't have to arrive 3 hours early or anything like you do with an airline. Um, Next slide here is our coach accommodations on board Amtrak. So you should see here the seats do recline back quite far. So it's about a 45-degree angle. So they don't go all the way flat, but it is a lot more room than you get with an airline. If you think about your sort of reclining chair that you have in your living room, it leans back right about that far. And as you can see here, they also have a leg rest that comes up. So it's quite comfortable seating, plenty of room for your luggage overhead, as you can see, and also in front under the seat in front of you for like a laptop or a purse. You can put that under the seat in front of you. As you can see, they've got great big nice windows as well as outlets, so you can charge your devices, so laptops, iPads, iPhones, cell phones, that sort of thing. You can charge them right there at your chair. And also a little tray table if you want to have a meal at your chair. So coach seating is really very comfortable, especially if you're doing a daytime ride from Denver to Glenwood or New York to Niagara, something like that. But if you folks are going to be interested in taking the overnight trains, I definitely recommend that you look into the sleeping accommodations on board the train. So the two main sleeping cabin types are called roomettes and bedrooms. So the roomette, as you can see here, it's the slightly smaller of the two accommodations. It's the more economical room, I would say. Um, During the day, it's two seats that face each other, so it is designed for two passengers. And then, as you can kind of see in the diagram there, at night it folds down into two bunk beds. Now, with the roomette, you do have outlets again, so you can charge your devices. Make sure your camera is nice and charged up to take some photos at that big, beautiful picture window. There is a tray table that folds out again if you want to eat a meal here in your roomette. You also have climate controls. And in the evening, like I said, the sleeper car attendant is going to fold down your seats into the bottom bunk, and the top bunk will fold out from the wall. You can't quite see it in the photo there, but it is pretty much just above her head is where the top bunk is. It'll fold out from the wall. So it'll be two bunks for sleeping, one per person. And that door does close, and it is, your own private little room during the day and at night as well. So you don't have to worry about doing the beds on your own. Your sleeper car attendant will do that for you. Every Amtrak train has a sleeper car attendant, one attendant per car, and they are really fantastic. They'll take care of your sleeper cars, they'll tell you where you are and what you're seeing as you go by, and they also take care of the facilities. So the restrooms and shower access with the roomettes is just down the hall, and you are only sharing that with the other folks that have a roomette in your car on board the train, so you're not sharing it with the entire train. You're just sharing it with the other folks with roomettes in your car, and the sleeper car attendant will take care of it and make sure everything is nice and clean and sanitized quite frequently. Um, the other room option on board Amtrak for most folks is the bedroom. So the bedroom is a little bit larger room accommodation. As you can see here, it's a love seat. You can sit next to each other or across from each other with that freestanding chair. And the other main feature about the bedroom is that it does have its own private toilet and little shower stall, so your own private facilities included with the bedroom. So that's a really nice feature of that upgrade. Again, it is bunk beds for sleeping, so a bottom bunk and a top bunk, but it is a little bit larger, bedding. You could certainly fit an adult and a child on the bottom bunk. I've had folks tell me that they fit two adults, but you'd be very cozy doing that. I recommend more likely doing one person in the bottom and one person on the top. Um, and I would be remiss if I didn't give you at least a couple pictures of dining on board the train. I apologize, guacamole doesn't necessarily photograph super well in my breakfast photo, but I just wanted to feature just wanted to feature there for you guys kind of some of the options that we do include. So you can order an omelet made to order on a lot of these trains. They have a steak dinner. You can get it, ordered per your specifications. If you like it medium rare, there'll be a pasta option, a salad option usually as well. So as I mentioned, the seating for breakfast is first come first serve. And then for lunch and dinner, typically you make reservations. On board the train, once you get on, they'll come around and take your reservation for what type of dinner you want, whether it's an early dinner or a late dinner. When you travel on board Amtrak, we do have some really fantastic discounts for you. So there is a child discount, as well as a discount for folks age 65 or over. Also, military and veterans do have a discount as well. So certainly ask about those if you are interested and do qualify for any of those categories. And then I have a special discount for everyone who's attending the webinar, just kind of as a great big thank you for attending the webinar today. We have an option to save $100 per booking if you do upgrades to one of the roomettes or bedrooms or any of the sleeper cabins. I should say as well, there is also a handicapped accessible room and a family room on some trains, which can fit 2 adults and 2 children. So any sleeper accommodation upgrade, you can save $100 per booking. You just want to reference the promotion code upgrade 100. And again, that's upgrade 100. You save $100 per booking if you book by April 28th, if you do want to upgrade to one of the sleeper rooms on board the train. So again, I know it's a little bit of a crazy time and maybe a lot of us are daydreaming about travel, but if you are interested in making any reservations, or even if you just have any questions at all about anything that you've seen today or anything that I didn't cover, please give us a call. We are standing by. We are working from home right now, so you can see a lot of my goofy friends and colleagues here with their pets, with their kids, with their giant stack of cheese doodles, here at home, but ready to help you guys. So I know that it's a bit of a strange time we're living in, but if you have any questions, if you are interested in one of these trips, just give us a call. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. And speaking of questions, I do have just a few minutes left at the end here to tackle some of the questions that you've been asking. So please continue to type them away in your question box, because I promise if I don't have time to get to them on this live broadcast, we'll have somebody reach out to you and send you the answer to your question, because we want to make sure that you get as much information as you need about traveling on board Amtrak with Amtrak Vacations. And very lastly, I do have a question for you, and that is, what rail vacations are you interested in, and when do you want to go? Because if you do want any information, we'll be more than happy to get it over to you. So type that away in the question box as well, and I can have somebody send you information on any trips or destinations that you might be interested in. So without any further ado, I am going to jump in and grab some of these questions so I can try and answer as many as I can in the next few minutes. So thank you guys again for taking time out of your day. I know we're all really busy right now, but I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time while we dream about our next Amtrak vacation. All right, so I've got some great questions here. I do have a question from Janine. Is there an accessible accommodation on board? My husband is in a wheelchair. So great question, Janine. Thank you so much. I should have spoken a little bit more about it, but Amtrak does have a handicapped accessible room on board the train, which is designed to accommodate a wheelchair. So it's more spacious and it can, has grab bars and things like that. It is designed for folks with a wheelchair. So do let us know if you need that accommodation. Now, I will just tell you that the dining car is upstairs. So it's on the second story of the train. So if your husband can transfer, he can go up the stairs to the dining car. We can always try and get you a room as close as possible to that dining car. Just let us know. And if not, that's no trouble at all, because we're more than happy to arrange for the meals to be delivered right to your room so you can share kind of a cozy, candlelight dinner without the candles, cozy dinner just for the two of you folks there in your cabin. And that is available for anyone, by the way. Anybody who would like to skip the dining car and just have quiet, comfortable meal in the privacy of their own room. I know, obviously we're social distancing and things like that at the moment, so that's no trouble at all. Your sleeper car attendant can arrange for you to get the meal delivered right there to your room. That's no trouble. All right, I've got another question from Allison here. Allison would like to know if there's kosher meals available on board the train. So great question, Allison. There is kosher meals available on board the train. So if you folks have any dietary restrictions, let us know when you book, but also let your server know when you're actually down there in the dining car or making the order with your sleeper car attendant. So if you do go down to the dining car, you will be waited on by a server, same way you would be in a restaurant, and they're super knowledgeable about all of the food and everything that's being prepared. So if you are a vegetarian, there's always going to be a vegetarian option. Amtrak will also always provide a kosher option as well. And then if you have any other dietary modifications like low sodium or low carbs, just let them know and they can, tell you what you can and can't order basically. And as I said, with all of the major long distance trains, it is prepared to order food on board, so they can always, make a modification for you if they need to. All right. Other questions? Oh, great question as well from Gary, who wants to know if you are traveling in coach, can you bring your own food or eat in the dining car? So both, Gary. You can bring your own food on board, whether you're in coach or whether you're in a sleeper. So that's no trouble at all. The only difference would be if you did want to bring, a nice bottle of wine to have with dinner, you do need your own private accommodation for that. They don't want you to have that out in coach. But if you are in coach, you could go right down to the cafe car and order a glass of wine, down there. Certainly, if you're in coach, you can also choose to go to the dining car. You can make a reservation, same as anyone else. You would just pay out of pocket for your meal. So you would get a menu with prices on it, and you would just pay out of pocket for your meal there in the dining car, the same way you would at a restaurant. Great question from Patricia. Patricia wants to know if you are a solo traveler, do you have a roomette all to yourself? So you do have a roomette all to yourself, Patricia. Once you reserve that room is just yours, so nobody else will be, in there. It's actually quite nice. I took a roomette by myself on the Coast Starlight, and when you don't fall down the top bunk, you have an enormous amount of room. You can sit up in the middle of the night, not worry about hitting your head on the top bunk or anything like that. It's actually really nice. And the price for the roomette itself would not be any more because you have it on your own. Obviously, if you had two people in there, you split the cost between two of you guys, but it's not any more money necessarily to have it as a solo traveler. Great question here from Tanya, who asks if there's cell and internet service when you're on board the train. So there is most of the time cell service and some of the time internet service. I'm sorry I don't have a more clear answer than that. It really depends on what train route you're on and where on that route you are. So, for example, if you're traveling in the Northeast, going to Washington, D.C., you'll almost always have self-service and Wi-Fi. If you're traveling on the Empire Builder from Chicago out to Seattle, you'll have it some of the time, but sometimes you'll be in the middle of a national park in Montana and the service might be a little bit spotty. So just something to ask about when you are inquiring about the different trips, because it really does depend on what route you're on and where you're going. All right, I think I've got time pretty much for one more question. Again, please typing them away because if I don't have time to get to them, I'll certainly make sure that somebody on the team here reaches out to get an answer for you. I have a question here from Sandy, who is interested in the accessible room because the accessible room does still have bunk beds. That is true. So if you folks are, not necessarily or you're a little concerned about climbing up to the top bunk, we could do a couple things for you. We could get you the accessible room and a roomette, or if you don't really need the accessible room, you're just challenged, worried about climbing up to the top bunk. I often recommend folks get two roomettes for two people. That way that you can sit together during the day and you can sit. I always kind of book them right across from each other. That way, no matter what side of the train you're on, you can see the best scenery, right? Jump back and forth to the best scenery. And then in the evening, like I said about the solo cabin, you do have that cabin to yourself in the evening. So you only fold down the bottom bunk. Nobody has to climb anywhere. And it's pretty economical, even when you compare it to getting the bedroom. So it's not a bad choice at all. And just real quick, somebody else is asking about the scenery. One of the things I always recommend for folks regarding the scenery is to head to that uh, observation car because, as I noted, your room is going to be either on the left hand or the right hand side of the train, and the scenery is pretty much constantly changing as you go through the different parts. So there is no best side to be on necessarily, because on the left you might have mountains, on the right you might have a river. It's kind of up to your personal preference. So I always recommend folks spend some time in the observation car because those big comfy chairs actually can swivel in a lot of cases. So you can kind of swivel it left and see the mountain, and then swivel it right and see the river, just kind of depending on what you want to see. And where there are floor to ceiling windows, you get a really beautiful view of everything that you're going by. So that is all the time I have today with you folks. I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much. We have these webinar presentations all the time, so if you are interested in learning more, I know we've got some great topics coming up. You can go ahead and register. If you want to send them to friends and family, we always record them and we put them up on the Amtrak Vacation site as well, if you want to share the presentation with anyone. And definitely, if you have questions, any questions at all, please let us know. We'll reach out to you or just give us a call. We're standing by. You can also call your local travel agents as well. Those guys are super knowledgeable. A lot of them are working from home right now, so they're still there for you. Just give them a call. They'll be more than happy to help you arrange, any of these trips. So thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.